Watching KUHS The Stream on Malady Drive. This is the Weekend Boost. I am your host, Paul Lane, author of The Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story. Folks, those of you who follow the show know that I typically go into and explain a lot of the, talk about a lot of past guests that we've had on the show, and I always want to continue doing that. Today we're going to do something a little different. I have a guest, and I believe we're going to have an extremely powerful show today. And Diane Kissel was introduced to me by Marlene Rose Vigil, who is a friend of mine on Facebook, interestingly enough. And we kind of crossed paths purely by accident, and so she's going to be our guest today. I was just handed this. This is Puzzle Pieces of My Mind, From Transformation to Inspiration. Carla Michelle Vaughn actually wrote this book, and I guess we'll be having her as a guest on the show soon. So, Diane is actually not the author. Kathy Bird is the author of A Turquoise Life, and this is a book outlining the story of Diane Kissel. Diane is a Denver native, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Diane, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I told you in the beginning I'm extremely humbled to have you here, and your topic was very touching for me. It was very emotional for me to read, and I think it took and I know people always say you're very brave and it took a lot of courage. It's not courage, you're just surviving. But to be able to express the thoughts that you did in this book has been very, very transformative for me, and very eye-opening.
Thank you. You said we're just surviving. For me, that was something I wanted to get past the point of surviving, and I wanted to get to a place of living. Mm-hmm. and to move beyond what was given to me, mm-hmm. and to complete myself and to become a whole person. And so that was really important to me, because for most of my life that's how I would have described myself. It was as a survivor.
You are definitely a survivor.
And I wanted to move beyond that. So
I really appreciate that, and I remember getting to the part of the book where you said, I got to fix me. I got to mm-hmm. take care of my own needs. And so Let's go right down to the beginning. And so you grew up in Denver, and your father was Puerto Rican?
My father was from Puerto Rico.
Well, from Puerto Rico, yes. Mm-hmm. And he was a good provider, and he did his best he could. He had 10 children, so mm-hmm. He didn't have an education past the 8th grade, but he sold insurance. He was a bread man. He did many things. He did whatever he could to provide for his family, and he loved his big family. He mm-hmm. really, really loved his big family. He lost both of his parents when he was very young, by the time he was 8, and so I know that was something that he just reveled in. He had 7 sons, so he always said he had his baseball team, and really enjoyed all of that. So. You had a very normal life. Everything was very normal to a point. You went to church every Sunday. He was an usher. He was very involved. Went to church twice a day.
Well, he did. He was in the choir, and he was also an usher. So he mm-hmm. went to 2 masses every Sunday. Very devout Catholic. We got on our knees and said the rosary every night. He loved the church. He loved God. Unfortunately, he was a very flawed man.
I am going to make 2 and 4. I'm turning up these volumes just a little bit more. Sorry about that, folks. So, you say he was a flawed man, and by flawed man, when you were 5 years old, he started doing the unthinkable.
Well, he started molesting me from the time I was 5, and it continued and progressed in intensity. Fairly rapidly until I was 13, when it finally stopped. And that's another part of the story.
Yes, and that was just, oh my gosh, the process and the ending of it all. I mean, of the molestation was just very, very difficult to bear. As I mentioned when I first got here this morning, it was really a difficult book to read, and I think just because you feel so helpless and you want to reach out and, as the observer, you wish you could do something to help. And so you went to church and you made your first Holy Communion, you made your first confession, and you went in and told the priest, and I committed adultery.
I did.
And he just blew it by.
He just blew it by. Just gave me my, a couple of Hail Marys and a couple of Our Fathers to go say, and I basically did that every time I went to confession.
Wow.
Because in my mind that's what was happening, and I knew it was a mortal sin. I went to a Catholic school, so I mean all of those mortal sins were really pressed in on us, and. So I always confess that, but yeah, the priest never said anything to me, and he was also my father's confessor, so he knew, and I'm sure that my father confessed. I don't think the conscience he had would have allowed him not to, and I'm sure he struggled with hating himself because he couldn't control this part of himself.
Talk about the turmoil that you went through, because you knowing the Ten Commandments, you knew you had to honor your mother and your father, and yet he was forcing adultery on you, and so that had to have had some horrible.
Well, it did. I lived with guilt all the time, and I was a good little Catholic girl, and I tried to be a good little Catholic girl, and yet all these things were happening to me, and my father, like so many pedophiles, I think this is a standard line, particularly from fathers to daughters, is all daddies do this. So now you've got it, you're in that place of honor your father and your mother,
Yes.
and so you can't really do anything about that. I did tell my mother when I was 5 years old, and that Daddy was taking me out of my bed at night, and it stopped for a little while. It stopped for about a year until when I was 6. Then it started in earnest, and it never stopped. Well, I'll back that up. Every once in a while, I would tell my mother what was going on. It would stop for about 3 weeks to a month, and then it would resume, and it would always go to the next level. So it always got worse. So I learned pretty quick that talking didn't help my cause, really. It caused other things. When I was 11, I told. By that time, I'd already started menstruating and stuff, and my father had started full intercourse, and I went to school, and I told a friend that I thought I was pregnant. Well, she told a nun, who told the priest, who brought my parents in, and my father disappeared for 2 months, leaving my mother with 9 children, no visible means of support, no anything. So that guilt was on me, because I knew why he left, and it was my fault, and he was right. Had I never talked, nothing would have happened. So that was another guilt that I carried, that he was gone for 2 months, and I cannot tell you how difficult it was on my family. And that was the first time my family's picture was on the front page of the local newspapers.
The Rocky Mountain News.
Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post. At that time, we had 2 newspapers in Denver.
When you thought you were pregnant, you were just a child, and how would how did the other kids in the school respond to you? Were you rejected? Were you ostracized? Were you supported?
No. I only told one friend who that happened to. No, everybody. I don't know how to say this with it. I was because I loathed myself so much, and I did from the very young age. I presented myself as something different. I presented myself as everybody's friend. And I was the person who would always pick the underdog who nobody wanted to play with, and I would play with them, and then everybody else would play with them because they liked me. And so I never had that kind of problem. I always had lots of friends, and in fact, I've said many, many times in my life, I could not have made it in this life without friends.
Yes. Friends
for me are essential, because they're the ones that held me up when I was falling.
As you got older, you separated yourself. You would go to a place in the mountains. You would go far away. You would become Diana number 2.
Well, I wouldn't even have to go anywhere. It would be a matter of getting. Well, I can tell you, when my father would come upstairs and say, "Diana, come down to the basement and fold clothes." I would in my mind transform into, and not knowingly. This is what I found out many years later with therapy and everything. But I would change into my alter ego, and Diana #2 was the sexy little girl, and she could live with what my father was doing to her and everything. And then when he would be done with me, and I would walk back upstairs. By the time I'd get back on the couch with my siblings, I would have transformed back to myself.
And when you walked out into public, you were Diana #1.
I was Diana #1, except
Yes.
when I wasn't.
Yes. And so it had to present a terrible conflict within yourself, because these two people are almost a good and a bad, or
I always had, and I could picture them. You know, the quintessential angel on the one shoulder and the devil on the other, and those were they were always there struggling with each other. Always. I mean, and I could picture them, you know. I guess I got that from cartoons or something, but I could absolutely picture them struggling with me.
Two voices in your head.
Yes,
Yeah.
at all times.
Yeah. As you got older, you even while your dad was still there, you always tried to. I mean, you seemed like you were such a good kid. You always made such an effort to please your parents and to be as good of a girl as you could. And when you would tell your dad no, he would punish you.
My father would. Oh, absolutely. Every once in a while, I would tell my father no, or if I talked to my mother, like I said, it would stop for maybe a month. But in its place came just cruel punishment. My sister and I washed dishes every day, and we always had a good time washing dishes. We did lots of singing and lots of giggling and stuff. I still enjoy doing dishes to this day because of that. But my father would come in, and I was always the dish dryer because I was a little girl, the younger sister, and he would take a plate off of the cabinet and look at it, and if there was even a speck of water on it, I'd get punished for that. And that meant, you know, taking off his belt and whipping me, and you know, I couldn't see my friends. I couldn't get phone calls. I would get punished and grounded for the slightest transgression. And so I learned again, you know, that compliance meant I had a life. So if I allowed my father to do what he wanted to do, then I could see friends, I could have phone calls, I could be halfway happy. And the other thing is, if he wasn't able to do what he wanted to me, the rest of my family suffered too, because he wasn't just quick with the belt with me, he was with everyone else. And so I felt like I was protecting my family, if you will, you know. For a little girl, I had a whole lot of guilt going on.
That's a big burden. Yeah, you were carrying a load there.
Yeah, absolutely.
The molestation went on till you were 13 years old, and a day came when, shortly after you told your friend that you thought you were pregnant, he disappeared. And
well, he disappeared.
I'm sorry.
Okay, he disappeared for 2 months, and then came back, left me alone for a month, and then when it came back, it was intercourse most every day, really. And but I had a particularly, and my father had some fetishes that were very unpleasant. And after a particularly bad session with my father, I just thought, I'm done. I'm 13 years old. I'm done. And so I ran away that night. And as it was, I jumped off the roof of our house and sprained my ankles. I didn't get real far, but we had my mother's cousin ran an orphanage near our house, and I went and saw her. And she didn't really know what to do with me, and I didn't tell her the whole story, but she called my aunt and uncle, and they came and got me. And so it was the first time I told anybody really outside the household, because my aunt asked me what was, actually it was my Aunt Lil.
Oh.
And she asked me what happened, and I told her, and of course she told her husband, and then they called my parents over, which I was mortified. I was, you know, by that time my father had told me if I told anybody, he'd kill me.
So it went from, this is our little secret, to if you tell,
then I'll kill you. And I believed my dad. You know, I mean, I had no reason not to believe my dad. He'd never killed anybody before, but I believed my dad. And anyway, they talked to my parents, and on the way home, it was the most difficult ride I think I've ever taken in my life. But we got home, and we didn't talk about anything in the car. We just went home. A couple days later, my mom told me that my dad promised he'd never hurt me again, and all of that. And he left me alone that week. That was a Sunday night that I ran away, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, he left me alone. And then Friday night, he ended up in my bedroom again, and he was fondling me and getting ready to take me out of the bed, because he generally took me out of the bed and moved me someplace else. And my sister, who I've always slept with ever since I was out of a crib, woke up and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm tucking Diana in." And she said, "No, you're not, and I'm going to tell Mom." Well, unbeknownst to me, my mother had talked to my sister and told her to watch out for Dad doing anything inappropriate. And then we went to sleep. And about, I don't know how many hours later, but at 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, and at the base of the bed were some policemen, and woke my sister up, and we asked them what they were there for, and they said, "Well, your dad has hurt your mom." And of course we started crying, and we went and rounded up our brothers, and we had a little brother, Alan, Vincent, who lived, we had a little alcove in our bedroom, and his bed was there, and we noticed he was gone, and we went to get Alan, and he was gone, and so the 7 oldest of us were all together, or the 6, because one of my brothers was away at camp, and the policeman came upstairs again. We asked him what happened, and he said, "Well, your mother's dead." And we said, "Well, where are the little kids?" And he said, "They're dead as well." So my father had killed my mother, who was 7 months pregnant, and the 3 youngest, and his plan was to kill the whole family, because in his mind he felt like it would be better to do that than to dishonor our family by finding out that he was a pedophile. And that had been his plan, but we had one little brother, Alan, who was what do they call it? Special needs, and he was the favorite of the family. And when my father was killing him, he woke up and said, "Daddy, Daddy, don't." And when that happened, it kind of took my father out of his manic phase, I guess, and so he finished killing Alan, but then he stopped, and he went out in the back to try to commit suicide with carbon monoxide, and couldn't do it. So he went in the house, called his 2 brothers and sister in New York, told them what he did, and then he called the police. And that's why they were there. And so I had my first breakdown that night, and it was watching my father being taken away in handcuffs. And the other thing is the 2 youngest were not physically my children, but because I was one of the 2 girls in that family of so many boys, the baby was a girl as well, and she was my charge. So I would get my 2 little, Vincent and Teresa, up every morning, get them dressed, get them fed. Before I'd go to school, I could come home for lunch, and I would get them lunch. I would go back to school. From the time I'd get home in the evening, they were my kids. And so it was like losing my children. I can't even tell you.
So his act was not just an act against them, it was actually inadvertently an act toward you.
Oh, well, toward, yes, absolutely.
He was keeping his promise that I'm going to kill.
Well, yeah, I never thought of it that way, but that's what he did, and it was a horrible trauma for my family, for all of us that were left. But for me, I knew why he did it, and I felt like I had killed my mother because I had talked again. And I had always been told not to talk. And I talked, and horrible things happened when I talked.
Talk about this guilt that you felt, I mean, you felt this responsibility after this all happened. You said, "I killed my mother. I murdered my mother. I'm a bad girl."
And here it was totally my fault.
Yes.
And so for years, I couldn't allow anything good to happen to me because I didn't deserve it. I was a bad person.
You sabotaged yourself.
Oh, I totally sabotaged myself. I totally sabotaged myself. And probably the day after my mother was interred in the family, I went to the library. I used to walk to the library every day. That was my safe place. And I walked there and was standing on the street corner, and some man came trolling by and opened his window and said, "You want to ride?" And he had the look of my dad in his eyes, kind of. And I got in the car and started that was, and I will call her Sandra. That's what I always said. My alter ego's name was Sandra. So Sandra got in the car and let him do to her what he wanted, and then she got out and went home and as Diana again, and that was my life for a long time, because anytime I'd start feeling good about myself in any way, I'd have to prove myself that no, you're bad. And I had this label. It was actually a neon sign, and I could really just see it, you know. And so I would have to live up to my neon sign, if you will. And I did that for a long time. Nobody knew about that. I was the only one that knew about that. To everybody else, I was the good sister, the good student, the good girl. But I just, my alter ego would just take over. And now I have to say that my father was sentenced to death in Colorado, and at the time they didn't have the death penalty, so he was on death row, but there wasn't a death penalty. Well, in 1966, Colorado reenacted the death penalty, and my father wanted to be executed. He could have had stays of execution and everything, and he elected not to. I always felt like my father took the easy way out, because he never had to live with his children's hate, if you will, and anger. Prior to that, for my father, it's a crazy thing when you think about it. We went and visited him every Sunday in Canyon City. We would drive as a family down there every Sunday. My oldest brother would take us, and we would sit with him for our hour allotted, and we would go in and have to get frisked from head to toe, just like common criminals. It was the most degrading thing, that being frisked every Sunday. I just hated it. And I know my sister did too, because it was just horrible. But we would go dutifully every Sunday, and you know, my father would still kind of rule the roost. It was kind of crazy. He'd taken away our life. He'd killed our mother. He'd killed our siblings. Yet he was still our father, and so he would want to know about school. He wanted to know about this and that. You know, I took my boyfriend to visit him. My sister introduced him to her. She was getting married, her fiance, her husband. I mean, so he was still our father. And then it came time for his imminent execution, because he chose not to have a stay of execution. So in 1967, in June, almost less than a month to the day that 4 years after he killed my mother, he was executed. But we had the quintessential Last Supper the Sunday before, and we were getting ready to leave, and he says, "Diana, come here, I want to talk to you." And my first feeling was, oh my God. And then I remembered, okay, there's a guard in the room, he can't do anything to me.
Because those were the words he always would use.
Oh yeah, just, you know.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "Try not to let what I did to you affect the rest of your life." And I remember just thinking, that was his apology, I suppose. But I remember thinking, are you kidding me? Do you understand that affects every moment of every minute of every day of my life?
And you went through that torture for years after.
Oh gosh, yes. Okay. Well, in fact, I went on right after he was executed, Sandra came out crazy for quite a while. And then I was in a foster home. Actually, when he was executed, I'd already been in a foster home. My aunt, our incredibly angelic Aunt Ruby, took all 7 of us in. She didn't want us to get split up into foster homes, so she took in all 7 of us. And I gave her a lot of her white hair, I know I did. And she found it very difficult when I was 14 to control me. And so she put me in a place called the Good Shepherd Home, which was run by nuns. And it was the best thing she could have ever done to me. And many years later, I thanked her profusely every time, you know, because I don't know where I would be. I'd probably be dead, is the truth. And but it was a safe haven for me for the 2 years I was there. And then I went into a foster home because I was still kind of mad at my aunt. And I lived in a foster home. And so when my father was executed, I was living in a foster home.
We'll get right back to that. I just want to do a quick station break.
That's fine.
Folks, if you're just joining us, thank you. You're watching the Weekend Boost. This is KUHS, The Stream on Malady Drive. We are talking to our guest, Diane Kissel. She is the subject of A Turquoise Life, A Woman's Journey Through Trauma and Triumph. The actual author is Kathy Bird, but this is a cover of this book. Diane, where can anyone pick up a copy of this book?
Well, unfortunately, our publisher, the publishing company we went through, Dog-Ear Publishing, I'm going to say their name so nobody even tries to go with them, as he went out of business and never told anybody. So we didn't get royalties, we didn't get anything. He's got all of our manuscripts, he's got everything. And nobody any of his authors can't get our stuff. However, I had all of this stuff, so I'm trying to get it put onto Amazon. So that people can buy the book, and I'm in the process of it, but I keep running into little problems getting it on. I've got it all together. I keep trying to put it on, and they need the cover resized, or they need this resized, or something, and that's not my forte. And so I keep reaching out to my friends that are good at that. So I'm hoping within this week I can get it up onto Amazon.
I'm telling you, folks, this is a book you must read. Diane, I know that there's someone out there who is a victim of abuse, and they're probably maybe listening to the show right now, and afraid to come out, afraid to tell someone, and afraid to confront their perpetrator. And I'm very angry as I say these words, but what words of advice do you have for someone who's going through this, a male or a female? Male
or female, it doesn't even matter. Sexual abuse knows no gender. So, what I know for sure is you have to do it in your own time. Okay, you have to do it when you're ready. What I do suggest is if you have a confidant, an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or the mother of your best friend or somebody that you feel that you can trust, then talk to them. Because especially in our day and age, back when I was a kid, incest was not talked about. That was all still undercover. We lived in a big Leave It to Beaver world where everybody pretended that families were wonderful, and so nothing was talked about. We now live in a world where everything's talked about, so you have options. There's places you can go. There are people you can talk to that are going to listen to. If you go to the police station, if you go someplace. Now, having said all that, sometimes that means that the police are going to come to your house and maybe arrest your father or your brother or your uncle or somebody. So it does start an effect around you. So you have to be ready for that. But I highly suggest that you talk to somebody, and if you're past all of that and you're an adult and you're still just carrying all this baggage, please get yourself into some kind of therapy.
Yes.
And there's lots of options. I never had the money to do it, so I went through the county social services mental health, and where it was a real nominal fee, because I needed help. And so there are options out there that don't cost a lot of money by going to private therapy or anything. You can get help. the biggest thing is you have to choose you. You have to choose you. You have to choose that you're worth it. And that's one of those hard things to do when you've been sexually abused because sexual abuse, more than any other thing that happens to us, brings on such a shame in our core that we believe that we're not worth anything. We believe the messages we were told from somebody who didn't have our best interests at heart.
That's right.
And so that's a real difficult piece to get through. But there is help out there, and please, please, please love yourself enough to get the help.
You can take control of your life. You don't have to be the victim, and you don't have to let this happen. If you are a victim of this, please, please come forward, come out, because your life is important, and you are valuable, and you are not bad, ugly, nasty. You're not any of those things. And I just wanted to say that, Diana.
Well, it's true. The most important lesson I have in my book, the bottom line, I mean, you can tell your story and everything, but the biggest lesson is that you're in control of your life.
Yes.
That things that happen to you do not define you.
Absolutely.
You get to define who you want to be. And it takes work. It definitely takes work. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not like you wake up one day and said, okay, I'm all better. You have to put in the work. It's no different than wanting to lose weight and just saying, okay, tomorrow I'm going to be skinny, right? You have to work to do that. And you have to work to get healthy, but you have the power in you if you choose it. And again, you have to choose yourself. You have to say you're important enough to do it. And make that a truism in your life. And to everybody that's out there, it is true. You are important. And so you have to believe that and start believing that. And you can do it in easy ways. You can start with affirmations, putting up little signs around your house saying, I'm important.
I'm valuable.
I'm valuable. I'm not what somebody did to me. You get to make those choices. I did affirmations. I read every self-help book I could find. I did all of those things to get healthy, but I did a lot of therapy. I did like 23 years of therapy. So, and now I'm a whole person, so I know it can happen. And not only am I a whole person, I'm a real blessed person. I have such a blessed life now. It's like living two different lives. It's hard to even imagine that was my first life.
I wanted to talk about that. When we first met you, Dee and I went and met you and Fred, and it was like, this is such a cool couple. I just really enjoyed our visit. I mean, she keeps talking about, oh, that was such a great place. I said, was it a great place or a great company? Well, it was both, you know? But we did. We just enjoyed you. You went through some real turmoil in your life after you grew up and you got married to Joe.
Yes.
And Joe was a lot like your father, and he used the word stupid a lot, which really upset me because that was an F word in our house.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, I mean, you know, like so many people do. I mean, if you come from alcoholic parents, the chances of you marrying an alcoholic are pretty high. And so I married a man that my whole worth to him was my body. And he didn't think I was worth really anything else other than my body. And not only that, but he would buy my clothes. He would dress me the way he wanted me to dress. If I had 5 pregnancies in 5 years, and you know, if I put on 2 pounds, then he'd get upset with me because I was supposed to look like his Barbie doll.
Like a trophy.
Well, I was, and he relished that. He really liked that. And the really crazy thing about that is that when I would look in the mirror, I would see somebody ugly, but to him, I was arm candy. And it took me a long time before I could look at myself and recognize that I wasn't ugly. It's a real funny little thing, but anyway, you know, yeah, I had really no worth to him, and in fact, when we got divorced, he left me with a ton of bills, and when we went to divorce court, he came with a pad of all these bills that he had left, and he says, well, we can't do anything till these are all taken care of. And I said, can I look at your list? And I marked off all of them, and I said, these are all paid. except for this one that you accrued after you left, because that was a bar, and I'm not going to pay for your alcohol.
Mm.
And he looked at me, and I told him I'm going to school. I went back to college. I'm doing this and that. And he looked at me and he says, "You are smart, aren't you?" This was a man who had been with me for 20 years. So that was my first step to really getting healthy. And the reason that we finally broke up is one night he raped me. And I know some people say, well, you can't get raped, you're married. Well, that's not true. My husband had been with me. He knew my background. He knew everything. I'd been going through therapy. He knew everything, and there were very few things I wouldn't do sexually, and that's what he did to me. And so he got up in the morning, and I was waiting at the foot of the stairs, and I said, "You need to move out." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because I will never be a victim again." And that's when I really started honoring myself. And the thing is that he had been supporting me going to therapy, but he didn't really like it because I kept getting stronger. Because initially he was really able to control me, and as I got stronger, I started fighting that, and he didn't really want me to get healthy, and I did, and so I got out of that marriage. And
now, before you were divorced from him, you were actually asked to come onto the Oprah Winfrey Show.
I was on the Oprah Winfrey Show in 1987, excuse me, and I had never even heard of the Oprah Winfrey Show. My daughter was a stay-at-home mom, and she said, "Mom, you need to get on Oprah Winfrey." I said, "Well, what's Oprah Winfrey?" I was working full time, so I wasn't watching daytime TV. And she told me, and so at the time I had a different friend who was helping me write a book. And so we did a synopsis and we sent it into Oprah Winfrey. This was like in March of '87, and I didn't think another thing of it. And we had gone on a vacation, and we came back, and it was like maybe August, right at this time of year, like the end of August, like August 29th or something. And we'd had a neighbor girl coming in and feeding our cat and stuff, and there was a note on the table that said, "Call Oprah Winfrey." I'm like, "What?"
Wow.
Because I had sent that in March. I just didn't even give it another thought. And so I called, and they said, "We want you on the show on Monday." This was a Friday. Or, no, this was a Thursday. And I said, "What?" And so I went into work the next day, and I told them that I needed Monday off. I'd just come off of a vacation. And they said, "Okay." And unbeknownst to me, they brought in TVs and everything, so everybody at work got to see me on Oprah. But they flew me out and all of that, and that was wonderful. And I was on, and I had never seen her show, but she used to have just all of her guests come out at once, and she would kind of do a panel. And this time she had me come out, and I was on her show by myself for the first half hour. The other guests that were there were not real happy about that one. One psychologist had flown in from Seattle, and he was on for 2 minutes, and he was really upset in the limousine on the way back to the hotel because she changed the format of the show for me. And then on my ride to the airport, I got a call from I have to tell you, it's kind of a funny story, because I'm in a limousine in Chicago. Nobody really knows I'm there except the few people I told I was going to be on the Oprah show. And the limousine driver says, "You want to check that phone, make sure it's working?" And I'm like, he says, "You're going to get a call," and I'm like, "Huh?" You know?
In a limousine?
in Chicago, and it was Oprah, and she wanted to buy the rights to my story and actually make a movie of it. But I had a brother who said he'd disown me if I did it, and I couldn't do that to my brother. So I never did that. So it's one of those opportunity knocks once, and that's.
Yeah, I can imagine that for other members of the family, that this is a very difficult thing for them to accept or to comprehend even.
Well, nobody knew anything. That's the thing. And when I was 26, there was a man named Gary Gilmore that was in Utah, and he was up for execution.
10 years after.
10 years after my dad, and every time. Every newspaper was all about my dad rather than Gary Gilmore. His story may be on page 30, but because there was another headline story about an execution, my dad was front page news again, and it just threw me into another breakdown. And
they're almost making you relive the trauma.
oh, they were totally, because you can blank yourself out and pretend it's not there, but then all of a sudden you're inundated. So if I turned on the TV, it was on the news. If I turned on the radio, it was on the news. If I opened a newspaper, it was there, and I couldn't avoid it anymore. And so I needed to. I started therapy the first time. I had a breakdown at home, and my husband always said he didn't want me to go to therapy because he didn't want me to air our dirty laundry. He always thought I was just going to talk about him. I said, you know what I'm going through. You know I'm having nightmares every time I close my eyes. You know I need help.
Yes.
And so finally he came home one night and I said, listen, I said, this is the way it is. You either let me get help or I'll divorce you. I said, there is, and then I'll get help because I need help. And he decided to stay married, so he allowed me to get help, and that's why I went to Jefferson County Mental Health, and I went for 6 months, and but during that time, one of my homework assignments was to talk to each member of my family. And so I started with my oldest brother, and he came over for lunch, and I told him I needed to talk to him, and so I told him about Dad, and he got so angry at our dad, and not at me, and I thought he was going to be angry at me, and he wasn't, and instead he gave me a big hug and told me how much he loved me, and I can't even tell you what that did to me, because I was the black sheep of the family in my mind, and I had killed my mother in my mind. And he was telling me I didn't, and he put the anger where it belonged. And that was an incredible thing for me. And so then I did the same thing with my other siblings. And they all knew that something had happened the night of the murders, but they didn't know that it had been happening for 8 years. And
wow.
Anyway, so my family all let me know that they loved me and that they didn't blame me, which was a major burden off of me. And they were all able to get angry at Dad and express that. So what I said earlier is my father took the easy way out because he never had to deal with the anger of his children. And now as an adult with my own children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and soon to be great-great-grandchild, I'm glad because none of my kids or any of my family ever had to meet their grandfather either, you know. And so that's a good thing. But yeah.
Now, one of the things that I don't know perplexed me was Father Ronnie's inaction through the years. Not just in the end, but through the years. He was almost a conscious observer of it all.
Listen, we've had many friends that are priests, and I always tell them, you know, I just don't understand the power of the confessional. If you know someone is going to murder somebody, I think it's your duty to speak. And I understand that you make a vow for that, but I don't think it's ethical. I don't think it's. For me personally, I am still a Catholic. I don't go to confession. I haven't since I was a teenager. That was one thing I just cut out. I didn't think I needed to do that. I talk directly to God. I'd rather do that. But you know, they always say no. They can't do anything. But for me, I feel like they could have said to a nun, watch out for her, you know, keep an eye on her, watch out for this, without saying anything, you know, or direct me, I want you to go talk to so-and-so or something to get, but that didn't happen. And but Father Roney was with my father when he was executed, because he had been his confessor, and he used to go down and visit him in jail and everything, and I got to actually confront him after I had told my family. I wanted to talk to Father Roney, and as it turned out, he had left Denver many years before, but he was in town visiting. I called the old rectory at St. Dominic's, and they said, he's in town visiting. And so I talked to him and I asked him if we could meet, and I was able to at least confront him. And it didn't change anything, it didn't do anything except it changed something in me because I was able to get that part of my anger out.
And that's what matters.
It is.
No one else's needs are important here. That's what's really I think worth noting.
Yeah.
After you divorced Joe, you met Stan.
Well, yeah, Stan was my UPS guy. I worked downtown, and he'd always brought stuff to our company every day, and I worked for a seismic company, and he was there every day delivering, and we'd always talk and stuff, but you know, I knew he had a crush on me. and he was just a real gentle soul, never, you know, wasn't highly educated, but a real good man. And so when Joe left, I started seeing Stan, and we eventually moved in together, and all of that. And he was a good man. Meanwhile, I'm still getting counseling. I'm doing all the stuff to get myself healthy. I'm doing all of that, and I realized that Stan was a good man, and I loved him, but I was not in love with him. And he didn't meet my needs because, again, I said he wasn't very educated, so we couldn't have good conversation. He was just a real gentle soul. The word. I am a senior, so I can't always pull up words when I want them. I have a lot of senioritis going on here, but he was a good man, and so I told him I needed. The story is that I watched Beauty and the Beast. And I cried through it, and that's a feat in itself because I had turned off my tears at 13, and I don't cry real often. And Stan was just appalled. What are you crying at this movie for? And I said, well, it's kind of special. And he went on to bed, and I watched it again, and I realized right then I deserve a Prince Charming. Now I don't need somebody riding in on a white horse and whatever, but I need somebody who's going to meet my needs. I did all of this work to get healthy. I deserve a life partner that suits me.
On every level.
On every level. And so shortly after that, I told Stan I was going to move out. And this was like in early September, and I asked him if I could plan on moving out the first of the year because it would take me that much time to get my money together and all of that. And he was fine. And meanwhile, he's trying to keep me. And I told him, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with me. You're a wonderful man, and you'll make somebody a wonderful husband. I said, but it's just not. It's not enough for me. And anyway, as the universe happens, I moved out in January, and in early January, his father was in the hospital in Maine. He had come from Maine, and he went out to see his dad in the hospital, and while he was there, he was hit by a semi, and his brainstem was crushed. So I went out to Maine and watched this virile 35-year-old man waste away he looked like he was 90 when he died, 8 days later. And that was a real hard thing. But because of his dying, I met my husband, Fred. Although I'd known Fred for many years, he'd been my brother's best friend since 1963, but he'd been married and everything, and he was just my brother's friend. And so I always felt like Stan set it up so that I would be happy. So I felt like it was a gift from Stan, it was a gift from God, and they presented me with my Prince Charming.
And Fred was he was a different caliber of human being. He was very really matched to you. It seems like when you guys met, it was just really.
It was immediate.
Yeah.
It was immediate. He was you know, my ex-husband Joe was on this side of the pendulum, and Stan was kind of on this side of the pendulum, and Fred is at the bottom. He's the mix of both of them. He's a gentle man. He's a very good man. He was the best of Joe and the best of Stan and himself, and he's just the most incredible man. And
a lot. I mean, it seems like when you guys decided you wanted to give back, and you guys decided to go to Mexico and build a house.
Well, I'll tell you, our church started a mission called Southern Exposure in Juarez, Mexico, and it was there's this crazy priest that came to town and came to our parish and wanted stamps and this and that, and our deacon Mike said, who are you? Why do you want all this stuff from us? And he told them who he was and what he did, and he had been down in Mexico. He had retired from the Army. He had been an Army chaplain and had been down at Fort Bragg and used to go across to Mexico, and he asked the bishop there if he could help him out, and he gave him 3 churches, and the poverty there was unbelievable. So Father Stan started building schools down there. And then he would come through, and he was a beggar. He would come to all the parishes, tell the priest, I'll give you a day off, let me use your pulpit, and he'd preach. And so he got from all over the United States people wanting to go down to Mexico. But originally it was just an immersion thing, but then this Deacon Mike went down and he said, we need more than just people to come down and emerge and see. These kids need education, but they need homes. Where can they study if they don't have houses? So they started a program called Southern Exposure. And in 1 week we would go down with a group of people. It would be time, talent, and treasure. And we would build a house. And it's about the size of an oversized 2-car garage. It's not a big house or anything, but for them it was a palace because they were living in pallet homes.
With dirt floors and cardboard walls.
No windows, no anything, just pallet homes. And so, we'd give them a house with 2 doors, 2 windows, and about 24 feet square room, which they could break up, and it would have a central beam, and they could break up into 4 rooms or 6 rooms or whatever they needed to do, right? And so we did that. Anyway, there was in the bulletin asking for people, and I told Fred, I said, this is right up your alley. So he went, and I didn't like being alone for a week, so when he came back, I said, the next time I'll go with you. So we did it for actually 16 years.
Wow.
But all of 2007, in fact, from the first time my husband went down, he came home and said, I'd love to go there and spend a year there. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. And I was very involved with our grandchildren and babysitting, and I had my own business and all of those things, and I wasn't seeing it. And then in 2006, my husband had a heart attack. He had to have a stent put in. And I thought, 6 years prior, when I said I wanted to quit working and start my own business, he supported me and said, let's do it. And so I thought, you know what, he wants to go to Mexico for a year, let's do it.
And you did.
So I said, I could have lost him, and I thought, no, he really wanted to do that. So we did that. I sold my business, and we moved out of our house and rented it for the year we were gone, and went down to Mexico. And I'm a seamstress, and so I got everybody I know, and I put it in the bulletins and everything to donate sewing machines, and so we got 75 sewing machines down there.
Wow.
I actually had more, but some were confiscated at the border. But 75 women got sewing machines, and I taught 4 different groups of women to sew, of 75 people, and Fred built houses for a year. We ended up building 323 houses, I believe, in the 16 years that we were down there.
So
the year we were down there, we built 33 houses. And we've met incredible friends, our Mexican family down there. We still have but my husband is now president of the high school that we have down there, and so we still go down there 3-4 times a year, and we don't build anymore. But the program finally ended in 16 because all of us that were going down all of the time, 2-3 times a year, I had gotten old enough that it was too hard to be lifting those 40-pound cinder blocks like we were.
No doubt.
And so that part of the program changed, but yeah, it was a real good thing for us.
Tell me, how has gratitude played a part in your life?
Gratitude is everything. I start your day with blessings and gratitude. That's all I can say. if you get up in the morning and you say, oh, thank you, God, what a beautiful day. Look at that sunshine, look at the sky. Your whole day is different.
Yep.
That's what I know. That's what I know. If if I get a parking place that's close by, I say thank you. If whatever it is that I know, that's little gifts that we get all through the day, and we get little gifts all day long. If you just say thank you, it changes your attitude. It changes how your day is going to go, and if you get into a mindset of gratitude and blessings,
absolutely,
then you can make it through anything. Because so you got in a wreck in the car, okay? But you get up and you walk out. So instead of saying, oh, wrecked my car, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, you say, thank you, God.
I walked away from it.
I didn't get hurt. Thank you, thank you. Because the car can be replaced.
That's right.
You know, it's all how you look at it. If I am driving down the road and somebody cuts me off, instead of me screaming at them and flipping them the finger and all of that kind of stuff, I say, thank you, Lord, that he didn't hit me. And please take care of that crazy driver.
There's always a bright spot.
You know, because so it's all in your attitude, and we are in charge of our attitude. Not the kids that they're screaming through the house or anything, because it's all up to us how we react.
That is
and
absolutely
I
right.
just find, for me, that if I react with positivity, then everything is better.
Yes.
Life is better.
It is.
All.
It truly is. And I really wanted to touch on that, and we're unfortunately we're running short.
Oh wow, it's already been an hour?
Yeah, that was going to be a quick one. I want to definitely make this announcement. CALMA, the Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors, is having a book fair on September 23rd. That is going to be at 2060 West Colfax. You can call me at 720-233-6262 if you want more details. Please make it a point to go out to this. There's going to be a lot of authors out there. There's going to be really a lot of good information to be seen and shared. Up next we have Paul Chavez, Mr. International, with deep cuts, which is always great. I love to leave here and listen to that. And I just want to close with my motto. Everybody's looking for a hero. If you can't find one, be one.
Amen.
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 And I got to tell you, all my life I looked for that hero and I couldn't find it, and I dropped out of high school and I got in trouble and I was arrested 2 times in 7 days, and I finally realized that, man, there's no heroes out there. I guess it's going to have to be up to me. And so I really do my best in every way. I know I fall short like we all do, but if you can't find a hero, be a hero. Folks, you've been watching the Weekend Boost. KUHS The Stream on Malady Drive. I am Paul Lane. We've been talking to my guest, Diane Kissel. It's been, more than an honor. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Your book moved me deeply, and I highly recommend it. Yes?
Can I say one thing? If you look on Amazon, you can find used copies of my book.
Yes.
Until I get it on there for reprint.
And this is a book worth reading, and our guests just keep getting better and better, and folks, tune in 2 weeks. We're going to be having David Ronquillo. He is an attorney on DACA, the Dreamers, for the Dreamers, and I met him a few weeks ago, and I was really impressed. I'm excited to be having him on the show. Again, book fair, September 23rd, 2060 West Colfax, supported and put on by CALMA, Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors. Folks, again, this has been the Weekend Boost. Thank you so much for joining us. I treasured this time with you. And remember, if you need to reach